So I'll start with a few, and then I'll open it up to the audience. I wanted to start with something you said in your introduction, that you wouldn't have made this film if you didn't have kids. So it's kind of interesting to read the film as a response to parenthood. I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on that. Was it having a kid that sort of, brought you back to this world of childhood, specific memories it triggered, or was it observing your kids?
Yeah, it's a lot about that. It's not based on my kids, like directly. Yeah, it's. When I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and be like teenager. And was a teenager, I wanted to be an adult. And after that, I didn't really look back. I had friends who had this kind of nostalgic relationship with their childhood, always referencing the childhood when whatever subject arose. I never was like that. And it was when I had kids, I suddenly would observe them, watch them, and suddenly something would trigger a memory of like something very ordinary maybe, but it just would get a whiff of that feeling of being a child. And then suddenly, like I said in the introduction, I was just reminded how radically different you just experience the world when you're a child, and how you feel stuff, and it's so open. You don't know how things function, you don't know what's possible or not, and you're learning new stuff every day, and everything's so elastic and open, and you feel things in a different way, and you can't really hold on to that feeling as an adult. So I just had like a moment of remembering that, and then it would go away. And also like observing my kids in everyday situations. I remember like picking up my daughter in kindergarten, and arriving, I would see her with some other kids before she sees me. And I would see her running around with those kids, and she would be different in some way. It's hard to describe exactly what way, but she was just another person. And then she would discover me and say, "Hi, Dad," and then she would just become that person I knew, but she had her own life there that she would never think of telling me about, because she wouldn't think it was important. She already was thinking about something else, or she didn't have the words to express that, but she had her own life there that I wasn't a part of.
Can you say a bit about this, idea of starting with wanting to explore this child's eye view of the world, childhood experience, and moving towards horror, towards the supernatural? Like, where did that come in?
Well, one of the first ideas I had was about, very simply put, the magic of childhood. And I think the idea was, what if like a group of children were playing in something, while they were playing, something magical, something inexplicable would happen, and they would just accept that as part of the game, and then they would go home to their parents, sit down at the dinner table, and that magic wasn't there anymore, and you would think that was just their imagination. But what if, in the context of the movie, that magic was real? I think that was the start of the idea. And then, of course, if that magic is real, then the kids need to have some sort of powers, and out of that, the kind of supernatural tale evolved. And also, if kids have powers, something bad will happen, because kids aren't supposed to have powers for very good reasons.
I guess on that note, can you say a bit about the title of the film, The Innocence, which I think sort of, captures what the film is exploring psychologically and philosophically, but it is also the title of another film, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and I'm wondering how important that you felt it was to sort of be in conversation with this film by Jack Clayton from like the early 60s, which is based on the Henry James story.
Yeah, based on Turn of the Screw.
Yeah.
It was, I really liked that movie. It's a very good movie. And when we named the movie The Innocence in Norwegian, that movie wasn't well known in Norway, and I think it maybe even had another title in Norwegian, so that wasn't the problem. But when we were going to make the international title, I was kind of, we need to find something else, because I don't want people to compare my movie to that great movie from the 60s. It would be like setting me up to fail in a way. And but I just felt the title was such a good expression of some of the main themes. And some people say, it's an ironic title, but I don't think so. It's more like a question, and it is about. I mean, kids are innocent. You know, it's a reason why you can't, put on a trial and send the kid to jail, because they're not responsible for their actions yet, for very good reasons. They're not finished evolving. So that question is a real question, and the movie is a lot about how you evolve your own set of morals, and so I felt, well, we need to keep it, even though people will compare me to Jack Clayton.
I think it's quite a different film.
I think the thing with my movie is that a lot of people, like in distributing a movie or in festival, or if you make something that resembles a horror movie, people will try to find like the subgenre, and they say, oh, you made a scary kids movie. And creepy kids or scary kids, and I think Jack Clayton's Innocence, in a way, is that kind of movie. But that's, in a way, also the opposite of what I'm doing, because those movies, they're about adults, and they're looking at the kid like on the other side of the room and thinking, something's off here. Is he possessed by the devil? Is there some demons? Is there a ghost? You know, that kind of thing. And my movie is about being with the kids, understanding the kids, being in their inner circle, and it's the parents who are in the background. Yeah. So for me, it's kind of the opposite of that genre, but I understand why people need to put it in some sort of drawer.
But it really is a film in which the kids are completely dominant. And you know, I was hoping you could say a little bit about casting and then working with the kids. I mean, I'm sure casting was a long process, and I would imagine like there are difficult scenes to work with children. So if you can say a bit about casting and directing child actors.
Well, it's when I write for myself or with Joachim, I have this rule of never like thinking too much about practical problems, because it's so limiting for your imagination. You have to let it run wild. And there's so much you learn making movies that some stuff are very difficult, and you need to like keep that out of the room. And then I ended up writing a movie with 4 very young kids and a cat, and you should never work with kids and animals.
Okay, we should tell people that the cat was not harmed.
The cat was not harmed, obviously. You know, I'm so embarrassed each time I was screening. There's so many people working on a movie.
Preempt that question. It's cinema. The cat was not harmed. So.
We make like a 6-minute end credit scroll, and the most important thing is in Norwegian, like no animals were harmed. We should have that in English and have it first in blinking. So many people are afraid that the cat was really hurt, but it's fine. No, but
the children were also not hurt.
Yeah, but people don't care about that. They only care about the cat. Yeah. No, but after I've written the script, and me and my producer Maria Ekerhoff is sitting right there, we knew that would be the main difficulty, was to find the right kids, make it work with them, and so we put a lot of the budget into casting and working with the kids, and we spent over a year finding the right kids, and then more time working with them, learning like the basis of acting, so they could we had like a course for them where they could like each week we would work another emotion. Like this week it's fear, this week it's sadness, this week it's anger, this week it's more like joy, and we would give them the tools of finding those emotions and bringing them back up on set. And of course we were very concerned about some of the scenes being difficult and might traumatize them, and so we over prepared some of them, talking about what was going to happen, whatever. And it was very, very important to me that we never surprised the kids in any way, so they knew everything that was going to happen. And sometimes with child actors, people like to, because they only have them for a couple of days, they want to like put them in a situation and then maybe genuinely surprise them, so they get real reactions of surprise. And I couldn't do that, and I didn't want to do that, because if you surprise them like that one day and you need them for like 30 more days, what are they going to do? Like next day, they're going like, okay, where's the surprise? You know, I needed them to really feel secure and create this bond of trust. So we were always answering truthfully when they asked the question, and they learned everything. And sometimes when we got to those scenes, I mean, I remember having told the youngest girl, who was 7, who plays the role of Aisha, and I told her when she gave her the role that her character dies in the movie, and she didn't think of asking how until the day when we're going to rehearse that scene, and there were like these fake knives and a stunt person, and she picks up one of the fake knives and throws it in the air. Oh, this is how I die. Cool, you know? And she had a lot of fun shooting that scene, which is, I think, one of the most painful scenes in the movie, and also because, I mean, she was 7, and she was asking questions about the character's motivation and whatever, because she was so intelligent, and she really understood the difference, as all the actors did, between the character and themselves, between fiction and reality. And most kids that are good at acting, they do a lot of role-playing games. They're used to that kind of thing. So they thought it was fun to do the extreme stuff, you know. And of course, in a movie, you only shoot like a small piece at a time. And kids are so hyperactive, and they change mood in an instant. So we're doing like this moment of terror and panic, and I say cut, and then she would just do cartwheels over to the sound engineer and have fun with him, and I go, no, we need another take, and please come back here, and then she go back into that terror and hyperventilation and being in that moment, because she's a good actress, but also because she's a child, and they don't need that method kind of staying in the mood for hours on end. They can just change like that, which also makes them fascinating to watch, I think, because kids can change like that. You know, that's the nature of their emotions.
Can you talk about the decision to have, you know, one of the characters having autism? And I assume that was something that you also worked on in terms of researching it and figuring out how to portray that.
Yeah, it was something that happened early stages when I was beginning to write and work on this. I just read an interview with a Norwegian writer. She was called Olag Nilsen, and that was the first time she talked openly about her autistic son. And she described something that she called regressive autism, which meant that her son evolved normally and communicated with language and just like a normal kid until he was 3 or 4. And then his language disappeared, and he became nonverbal autistic. And for me as a parent, that's a horror movie. I just kept thinking about it, that it felt so, because I mean, if your child is born with any disability or even nonverbal autistic, you learn I would assume, to love that person as he or she is. But if you feel that you lost something, you know, it will be very hard not to think, oh, inside of that person, my child is trapped, or it's a very difficult grieving process. And I was thinking a lot about that until one point I said, maybe that's part of the movie, because I'm making a movie about that closed off secret world of childhood, and what's more closed off than a nonverbal kid like that. So it just came, and then all that will be interesting if another child has some sort of access to that person's feelings and thoughts, and that storyline came out of that. And of course, then just added another layer of difficulty, not only for kids and a cat, but also one of the kids being this very demanding role. And of course, we couldn't cast a real heavily autistic child, because that person, nonverbal, not only couldn't play the scenes where the child starts to speak, but also could never give our authorization to use him or her in the film. So that was we needed to find someone who could do that. And actually, I had written the role as a 14-year-old boy, because I thought we needed someone a bit older to play that role. And then there was this 10-year-old girl that came into the casting, and the casting director, she saw her like just spacing out while waiting and having this look, and said, interesting. And we started to test her, and she was just like a gift from the movie gods. She was so amazing. She had this ability just to act with her mouth open and like not showing that kind of self-consciousness, because most kids feels they look unintelligent when they'll close their mouth in like 10 seconds, you know. And she could just keep going like that. And she was such a good actor. So I have done, like I said, a lot of research, so I could show her, oh, look at this piece of documentary footage and see what this autistic kid does with his hands, and look what this autistic woman does when she's feeling joy and happiness. And then the next time we will rehearse, I give her a chance to use that, and she would have picked up those gestures, like 10 years old. And she, like a pro actress, and she just kept amazing everyone with what she was doing. But yeah, so I could just pass on some of that research I've done.
Right. So you switched the role from male to female. Did you do that with the other parts, like in terms of switching? I mean, it's notable that it's a multiracial cast, and I'm wondering if that was something you wrote into the script. Was there, an attempt to get at a certain social dimension? Were you, was it the idea of multiculturalism in Norway, or were you, when did that enter the film?
There was a social dimension in the script, but I'd written all 4 roles as white Norwegians, because it was partly inspired by a place where I had spent some time when I was a kid, and that was the environment I lived in. But also when we found, it was 2 things. When we found the place we wanted to shoot, that was a very culturally diverse place. So, I mean, casting should reflect that in some way. But it was also my casting director. She said to me, how open can you be about these characters? Because if you have this very fixed idea of what they look like, that you want someone to be blonde or whatever, you will miss out on a lot of people, and you need quantity to find quality in those kind of casting situations. So she said, just try to be as open as possible. And then we decided just, okay, let's not care about the characters. Let's, like for the first part of the casting, just find the most interesting kids possible, and then see if we can fit them into the script. And we ended up changing the sex or ethnicity of all 4. There were 2 brothers, and and of course the other one changed their ethnicity. And then I was going to rewrite, because that would change stuff, but it changed very little. It changed. I mean, there was a search and replace on their names. That was mostly it. And one of the mother of Aisha, I rewrote some of her dialogue to be in Somali, but it was like the same script. It just added that dimension. And for me, it's a movie about childhood, and so the fact that they changed gender or skin color doesn't change that aspect of it, and the social dimension was already there in the script.
Maybe I'll just ask one more, and then I'll open it up to the audience. One other thing that's very striking about the film is the visual language of the film. You use a lot of close-ups, I think in really successful, really strategic ways, but then you also use a lot of wide shots. And can you talk a little, was that something you wrote in, or was that something you decided to do as you were shooting?
I wrote in a lot of the close-ups, but not all. But it was a big deal. I was my cinematographer, Sturla Brandt-Grøvelen, who's an amazing cinematographer. His latest work was with the Thomas Vinterberg film Another Round, but he also did the German film Victoria, the one-shot movie, and he did Rams, the Icelandic movie. He's a very talented cinematographer. And what we were talking about was that, firstly, for me, was most important thing was not to be scary, but to kind of rekindle those feelings of childhood in the spectator. And for us, that the key to that was the way kids experience the world, which is not only with their eyes, but with their fingers. Kids are constantly touching stuff, And we wanted to get the camera in there, even though it doesn't advance the plot, even though it doesn't make it more scary. We wanted to have those details of, like a finger picking up the scab and putting it in her mouth. That is something most people have done when they were a child, and maybe that will make them think about that, and maybe a moment like that would appear to them, and suddenly they are feeling the movie with their other senses, which I also feel like, how do you get cinema with the two senses that are actively involved? How do you get the other senses? How do you get the sensuous quality, the tactile quality? And I think the close-ups were really a big part of that. So we had like this speech at the beginning of the shoot, telling the crew that even though we are pressed for time, and you see me and Sturla, the cinematographer, making like this stupid thing of a nail, like when we have so much to shoot, and we're doing this shot close up. We're not crazy. We haven't lost it. It's an important part of the movie to get those shots in. So, and we managed to do that the whole way through to keep that thing alive, and also we wanted to have that, as you said, that juxtaposition between those close-ups and the wider shots, which give more of a feeling, sometimes of the powers and the wind in the trees, but also the fact that the adults can walk right past and don't notice anything that's going on.
All right, we'll open it up and take your questions. I think we have a microphone, so if you raise your hand, we will get a microphone to you. Right there.
Hi, I really enjoyed the movie. I just have one question about Stephen King, because I think this movie reminded me a lot of the writing of Stephen King, and also in another movie that you work with, Joachim Trier, Thelma, that also I think has some kind of a Stephen King-esque elements in it. So I just want to, can you talk a little bit more about, like, is this like actually an influence by Stephen King, or just a coincidence?
I was a big Stephen King reader when I was in my teens, so it's probably ingrained in me. I mean, and I'm a big fan of a lot of Stephen King adaptations. We were just talking about the Dead Zone by David Cronenberg, and which was an influence on the opening credits here. That I kind of did like the inverse of what Cronenberg does in the opening of Dead Zone. So of course it's not purely coincidental, but I didn't have like any, I'm doing this or inspired by that novel here. I was just very conscious that I wasn't doing the same thing as It, which movie that came out while we were financing this film. But actually he did one non-fiction book called Danse Macabre, where he has very interesting thoughts about childhood, and that was actually an inspiration. The reflections he did in that book.
I think we have quite a few there, and then there, and also we'll get to you.
Yes, I enjoyed the movie a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about the evil in the movie, because Anna, for instance, at the beginning, the first scene, she pinches the leg of her sister, and she deliberately steps on a worm when she faces the lake. So I was wondering if you could speak about the evil in kids, which is a tremendously fascinating topic. Thank you.
Well, I think it's also interesting that just the question of evil, which is maybe a difference from Stephen King, which was something that I was thinking a lot about, was that Stephen King and a lot of people who write and make horror movies, they really believe in evil as almost like an exterior force in the world that can take over or influence us, and I don't believe in that. I don't believe in evil. I think good and evil are just words that we use to describe the impulses and feelings we have, and some of those feelings are very antisocial, and we need to find a way to control them to fit into society and be a productive member of society. And I think a lot of that plays out in childhood because we have those feelings of anger and jealousy that can completely take over, and we also have more good impulses and rational impulses, and that we need to figure that out, you know, and kids have a tough time doing that because, I mean, even adults have a tough time dealing with anger, and how can you ask of a 10-year-old boy to control those feelings? And it was very important to me that all of the characters had some good and some evil, that they were, there was not like one evil kid, even though the one Benjamin character becomes the most dangerous. It was very important to me, and that's also why I cast that actor, because I knew he could convey that he was also just a kid. He was also just a victim of circumstance, of his background, of his powers that he shouldn't have, and I think he reminds us of that. But you see in a lot of horror movies, it's very Catholic. It's very black and white. It's very easy. That's the bad, that's the good, and at the end, hopefully good triumphs. And here, I hopefully it's more ambiguous, and you left with even like a sadness, even for Benjamin at the end, hopefully. You know, so it's very important to me that there was no pure evil in the movie, and but also to show that we all have these impulses, and it's very like the main character Ida. She has very cruel impulses, and when I was doing research, when I was thinking about the movie, I talked to people, and most people I talked to had very vivid memories of being cruel as a child, and stepping on the rainworm is like the smallest of those things. You know, it's usually people have done much cruel things to animal or the kids or younger siblings. Younger siblings have really suffered through a lot, and I was thinking, why is that? Why do we feel the need to test those limits, to experiment, to be cruel when we are children? And I think one of the reasons is that we are in the process of leaving behind our first set of values and morals. We came just like our parents' set of morals, which is like your mother saying, never do that, or your father say, always be polite, or you have all those sets of values that you use as a guide, but at one point you have to do something your mother said you shouldn't do, just to feel if you really feel bad about it. You know, you have to try and test those things, and I think a lot of those experiences that you have when you go too far as a kid makes it possible for you to have a set of values that are your own, that are ingrained in you, that are your own set of morals. You say moral compass in Norwegian. I don't know if that's an expression in English. Yeah.
Okay, I think there was one up there.
I had a quick question about, as you were writing this, did you imagine the kids to have an understanding that they were doing something wrong, or was it more so that they didn't really understand kind of like the consequences of their actions and stuff?
Well, the kids, that depends from situation to situation, and I think a lot of what kids do is that they don't really think through all the consequences. So there might be, I mean, I think Ida is very conscious when she puts the shard of glass in her sister's shoe that she's doing something cruel, but she doesn't really think about the consequences until she sees her sister walking around with it and probably feeling pain, even though she can't express it in a normal way. And I think that's very much what happens a lot, is that they do stuff. And I feel we have impulses that might also be just curiosity. So I think partly dropping a cat from a height comes from that curiosity. You learn that they always land on their feet. And part of you want to just check if that test it out, see if it's real, and then it's afterwards you realize, oh shit, that maybe wasn't such a good idea. So I think it's that kind of mixture, and they go too far and realize after, but they have some consciousness of what they're doing is wrong, I think.
Did the actors talk to you? Did you have those kinds of conversations with the actors?
Well, not exactly, not at that level, but of course they were sometimes curious about why their character would do something like that, and we would discuss it. And but they kind of, I mean, they understood a lot of it, you know, even though they wouldn't do the same thing, obviously. But they had some, and with some scenes we didn't do a lot of improvisation during the shooting, but when we did, you could really see they had fun with those darker impulses. They could really, they had it in them. It's kind of liberating to be in another character's skin and explore them, and they really could.
Okay, I think you had a question over. Was there a question down here? Okay, no, I thought there was one on this row. No. Yes, right there.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My initial question was similar to hers in that I was curious about this fact that we don't have I mean, there is a clear antagonist per se, but there are hints that he also is not purely evil and not designed that way. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the fact that you chose to have him die at the end, which felt at some point like the only way the film could end, and whether that speaks to whether he can be redeemed. Are you saying if things had been handled differently, that this boy could have been redeemed or not? And as a parent, observing or spending a lot of time with little kids, the parents in the film obviously were either sort of not able to be there, or were actually a source of fear and pain. So what is the ideal role, to your mind, of a good parent in shaping the destiny of their child?
I wish I knew. The problem with making a movie about stuff like that is people ask you questions, and suddenly I find myself answering like I know what a good parent is, and I'm a parent. I have 2 kids myself, and I definitely don't know what what the answer is to that question. What I feel is a very difficult thing as a parent is that regarding this movie is that you are afraid to let them go out in the world and explore it on their own and make mistakes and maybe be cruel and maybe regret something, and my generation of parents, probably the same here as in Norway, are very involved in their kids, and my kids have less time completely alone than I did when I was a child, and I think they need that time when the parents aren't watching. It's a very important time, but that feels like a lack of control as a parent. Like, what if they do that? What if they hurt themselves? What if they hurt someone else? But they need to be out in the world making mistakes, you know, and experiencing stuff. And I find that a difficult role to manage as a father. And the other question was about if he had been needed to die or if he could be redeemed. I think he could be redeemed. I think a child can be redeemed at any point, you know, that they're not beyond saving. And he has very obviously different points where it would be easier for him to roll back and not commit these terrible things that he does. But I think even at the end, I think it could have ended differently for him. But of course, in the logic of the movie and the logic of the other kids, it's too dangerous for him to try that. You know, it's not a viable solution. So it ends like that, and it always did in the script. And I think you have to feel the need for that to happen, but also, hopefully, like I said earlier, an ambivalence, that it's sad at the same time.
So I'm just going to have to ask one final question since we have a screening starting. When we showed the Oslo trilogy here, we invited you and Joachim to program a series around it, and it was full of really interesting choices, like some expected and some very unexpected. So if we invited you to program a small series of films around The Innocents, can you just name a few quickly?
Off the top of my head, like that.
Yeah.
The thing is that when I'm obviously a film buff and I love movies, but when I was making The Innocents, I didn't revisit a lot of movies because of there's so many movies about supernatural abilities and all that, and I didn't want to feel I was making another one of those. I wanted to make I want to make a movie about childhood. So what I did rewatch was like some of the classics about childhood, like Jacques Doyon's Ponette, with I think she's 4 or 5, the girl who plays the lead, and there's a beautiful documentary made about how difficult it was. That gave me a lot of hope, so those would be interesting to screen, and I also did steal an idea from a movie called L'Enfance Nue.
Maurice Piala's film.
Piala's first
something
feature.
Something bad happens to a cat too in that film.
There's something bad. That's where the cat thing came from, actually. So I would have to select that one to just acknowledge my inspiration.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, and Eskil, thanks so much for the film and for coming.
Thank you.